I was reading recently in one of the newspapers a reminder that the euro crisis started around about 5 years ago. I wonder what your view is in terms of the present situation, whether the crisis is still continuing and indeed whether it may get worse in the future if you think it has continued.
Yes, as you said, I speak on a personal basis, not officially in the name of the European Investment Bank. I think that the crisis obviously is not finished because otherwise you would not have the uncertainty which prevailed in the recent days. On the other hand, you have institutions which are following every day the markets and can intervene when necessary, like the European Central Bank, which decided that starting from Monday they will start to buy papers on the market, and this immediately calmed down all the fears in the market yesterday, if I understood my reading of the newspapers. So in fact we are in a situation where I would say policies have not yet changed, and therefore in my opinion, and this is a personal opinion, the solution has not been found yet, because the solution entails a change in policy. On the other hand, this change in policy needs a political majority to support it, and until now this political majority was absent. Maybe now the hope is that this political majority will be there.
Mm-hmm. I think May saw the euro crisis as taking many forms. It was a sovereign debt crisis, banking crisis and so forth. But one aspect of that also was the current account imbalances between countries and the very wide divergence of experience on the current account between member countries. I wonder if you feel that those current account imbalances were indeed a major issue, and if you do, whether they have been resolved.
Yes, we have been discussing yesterday in the FESSUD conference the question of the current account imbalances. In fact, we are in a situation where, if you want, Europe is a semi-federal state with some elements of a federal union, like the money, although some observers pretend that even money is not completely federal in Europe, but we do not have a federal fiscal policy. So in this situation the current account balances matter, because in fact there is no mechanism which would compensate current account imbalances, except essentially deflation in countries which have a current account deficit. So today, for a few years, markets thought that because of the monetary union, Europe had become already a complete federal union, and they did not they did not care about the current accounts. Then one day suddenly they started to discover that Spain had a 10% current account deficit and Germany a 10% current account surplus, and they started to be frightened about it. In my opinion, it is in the logic of the European Union that there should not be a current account balance of every country, because as in every country, you have some regions which generate a surplus and some regions which absorb this surplus. And but today, in fact, Europe is built in such a way that, in fact, the only political solution seems to be that every country should be in a balance in their current account. And this is why I think the proposal which was made yesterday in the conference was interesting, because it is based on an assumption of current account balances, and it proposes a package of policies which would, over time, reduce these imbalances and their negative effects on the economy.
Thank you. I wondered if you could just say, well, in your views, what would be the sort of appropriate policies which might be adopted to help resolve the current account imbalances, but also the differences in standards of living in different countries. As you indicate, deflation has been one attempt which has brought great misery, but we are looking now for what would be the alternatives. And I wonder, in your view, what would be the route which, or the routes which you would like to see advanced?
As I said, the issue is both political and economic. As long as one assumes that there is a need for current account balance, the only solution is to adopt packages like the one that were proposed yesterday by Professor Hein. I think, in my opinion, the solution to these imbalances is to create a European federal deficit, fiscal deficit. So, I explain myself. In a move towards integration of the European Union, national states essentially become regions. They lose their monetary power, and they lose, in fact, most of their fiscal powers as well. So the only place where you can exert the stabilization function macroeconomically is the federal level, which means the European budget. So the solution would be to have a federal budget which would then compensate automatically or in another way for these imbalances. However, politically this is very difficult to do, so my suggestion at this stage has been to say that one should in fact simulate a federal deficit by agreeing on certain European expenditures which could be, let's say, agreed to be European because they are supported by the European institutions like the European Commission budget or the EIB, and this expenditure which would be European could be taken out of the national ceilings for budget consolidation, which logically in a European Union must remain, because a region should not be allowed to create money. So it's only the federal state which could create money. So this is the logic is this one. I don't know how to implement it politically and legally.
We have, in a way, quite a lot of experience of what happens within countries when there are regional imbalances. And I wondered if you could say whether there are, you think, lessons to be learned from the experiences of countries like your own, Italy, in terms of seeking to resolve the differences between the regions, and what type of policies might or might not work in that sort of context?
That is a very difficult question, because regional policies are the most, and urban policies are the most complicated ones, and experience is very diverse, as you mentioned. Concerning, you asked me about Italy. In Italy, there is not a, everybody knows Mezzogiorno problem, which was tackled with specific policy until, let's say, the end of the 80s. And then basically these policies were strongly reduced. And in the 50s and the 60s, the economists of the World Bank, which helped Italians to put together the first economic plans for reconstruction after the war, I'm thinking somebody like Hirschman, for example, suggested actually an unbalanced approach to play the card of unbalanced development, with some regions which are stronger to grow faster and then to redistribute in the rest of the country. I think personally that this has worked for a couple of decades. But I'm not pretending that this is a solution for Europe. It is simply an experience in the times of the highest contributions of the Cassa per il Mezzogiorno. The transfers represented something like 1.5% of GDP in Italy, which is much less of the figure which is credited to the Germans for helping Eastern Germany, which is of the order of 4 to 6 or sometimes more percent of GDP. So one question is, what is the size of the transfers that you accept to do in order to compose and rebalance? And of course, the other question is what kind of industrial and regional policy you implement, and I think maybe in the UK they are much more successful in that, or in the United States, what kind of policy you implement in such a way to change the structure of the backward region and then automatically facilitate the rebalancing.
Do you think there's any prospect within the European Union of a development of regional and particularly industrial policies of the form which you say indicating were tried in other countries, or do you think the nature of the European Union is such that those development of those sort of policies is completely off of the agenda?
Well, I would distinguish between regional and industrial policy. Regional policy exists, although maybe it's not big enough. So the question is whether it is possible to bring it to the level which is necessary. Industrial policy, for the time being, is mainly, I would say, competition policy or maybe external policy. I would not feel confident to say that there is an industrial policy of the European Union, and I think there should be one, but at this stage it's still to be defined, and also there is no consensus on what this industrial policy should be, and actually thinking like the one that you are doing in FESSUD maybe would help also in that respect.
Thank you very much for your insights into the current problems within the Eurozone and possibly some resolution to those problems.
Thank you very much.